And we're live.
Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I first want to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. The Zoom meeting can only hold 100 people, but keep in mind you can always head over to the live Facebook feed to view the meeting. Please understand that we are under time constraints, so we will attempt to answer any questions entered in the Zoom Q&A. If your question is not answered during the meeting, know that your question will be answered as soon as possible. You can also comment on Facebook live feed with any questions you have, and we will also get those answered as soon as possible. And with that, I'll hand it over to Todd.
Hello, my name is Todd Gilchrist, OG Todd on Instagram, for those that don't know me. I'm Deputy Director for Arizona NORML since 2017, 2018. We are still doing a lot of work, double duty now that Michael Weiser's passing on May 13th. And we appreciate all the donations that went out on the GoFundMe page for Beth Weiser at the There Will Now Be Legal Marijuana in Heaven. Right now, they've donated over $21,000. And then we also, we're doing all we can to legalize in 2020. So with that in mind, we are still taking a lot of donations. And if you guys want to donate, please donate at arizonanormal.org. I tested the link out tonight. PayPal's working, so feel free to donate for us. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike Robinette, our secretary and leader of our Southern Arizona NORML chapter.
Well, thank you, Todd. That was quite a kind introduction. I appreciate that. And I want to just real quick say hello to everyone. I'm Mike Robinette. I'm the director of Southern Arizona NORML, but I'm also on the board of Arizona NORML. I'm the secretary. And I wanted to just do a couple brief updates relative to what's going on down here. We actually always have our chapter meeting 2 days after Arizona NORML's meeting if they fall on the same week. We meet on the first Thursday of each month. So we'll have our meeting in 2 days on Thursday at 6:30. It will be virtual on Zoom. You can go to soaznormal.org if you'd like a link to that meeting, or you could personally reach out to me at mike@soaznormal.org and I can send you a link. We will have, we're kind of following sort of what our state chapter is doing. We've already had Laura Conover, who is a Democratic candidate for Pima County Attorney. We've had her as a guest speaker. This meeting, we're having Jonathan Mosier, who is also running for Pima County Attorney, as a guest speaker. And we hope to, in July, have Mark Diebolt, the third candidate running, and then pull a forum together, a debate together before the election in August. Down here, our election for county attorney is over in August because there's only 3 primary Democratic candidates running. As far as Southern Arizona NORML, my duties really have been with the state for about the last 2 to 3 weeks. We've been working together. Our board has coalesced in unity, and we're working really hard together to move this for our organization forward. And I'm really excited about some things that have been happening. So we're really, really happy with the direction with which we're going. So we're excited about that. Lastly, I just want to give you a few updates. You probably all know that the legislative session, actually the 54th legislative session, second regular session, ended on May 26th when the Senate adjourned. The Senate actually adjourned prior to hearing bills that were sent over from the House. It was sort of a surprise because 3 Republicans went over to the Democrat side and voted to adjourn. Unfortunately, that our battleship, our flagship bill this year, HB 2049, which was the autism bill, it actually started out as attempting to add both opioid use disorder and autism to qualifying conditions. It was in committee, the opioid use disorder was struck, and the bill proceeded as just adding autism to the list of qualified conditions. When the House adjourned, that bill was on its 3rd vote on the floor of the House, and it had not been transmitted to the Senate yet. So that's where that bill is right now with the end of the session. A couple other bills of interest. You might have followed earlier that Dr. Freeze out of LD9 down here in Tucson, he attempted to do a tax and regulate bill, and it was HB 2657, and It stalled in the Regulatory Affairs Committee in the House and did not go any further. Kevin Payne's bill, Kevin Payne out of LD 21, he actually has a very feasible medical marijuana research bill, which would establish grants to research the safety and efficacy of medical marijuana. That bill actually passed the House CAL, or the Committee of the Whole, and was assigned to both the Senate Rules and HHS committees when the Senate adjourned. And lastly, I know all of you have heard of the loathsome bill that was called HCR 2045, and that was the infamous 2% THC bill that would have converted our medical marijuana program to a hemp program. So that the good thing is we actually fought that. We did some action alerts and we're in the committee hearing when that bill was in committee. The 2% was amended out. That got amended out on the floor, but that bill did pass the House. And when the session ended, that bill had already been assigned to Senate Rules, but there was no further action. The bill is still a very negative bill. It wants to fund research into just two topics. One, the association between the use of marijuana and violent behavior, and also the use of marijuana and a correlation to schizophrenia. That's all that bill wanted to study, whereas Kevin Payne's bill was much more nebulous in studying anything related to medical marijuana and its efficacy. So that bill is languished and it's sitting where it is as well. There was a last bill, and then I'll say there was a last bill called HCR 2044. Both those bills, when they say HCR, are called House Concurrent Resolutions. They have to pass both the House and Senate, but they don't go to the governor's desk. They actually then go to the ballot as a referendum. And so then the last concurrent resolution was HCR 2044, and that's from LD 11, Representative Roberts, and I live in LD 11, so I'm very familiar with what they're up to. That bill actually rated the medical marijuana fund to move monies to fund prison beds for substance use disorder situations as well as mental health. And I got the Southern Arizona RTS request to speak people. That came up really late in the session, and we all thumbed it down immediately. And with that, we're waiting for the legislature to do special sessions now that the governor will call and state the purpose. And we, of course, will continue to monitor the session. And if we can have any sway or do anything with our bills that are right now remaining in the 54th session that adjourned, we will certainly do that and keep everyone updated. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I'm going to send you over to our communications director for Arizona NORML, Ryan Wilson.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Welcome, everyone, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Ryan Wilson, the Communications Director for Arizona NORML, and will also be one of the moderators for our event. I would like to talk about Arizona NORML membership briefly. We've been working with NORML in DC about automating this process as much as possible for your benefit. And if you have not signed up for our newsletters on our new website, arizonanormal.org, please do so. It's one of the ways that we're going to be communicating with the community as a whole. Ultimately, we want to be able to manage your membership directly through the website, which we expect to be able to share with you via updates over the upcoming months. Now, I would like to introduce our guests for this evening's panel, starting with Moe Asnani, the owner of Downtown and D2 Dispensaries in Tucson, and also an ADA board member. Say hi, Mo. Wave. All right. Next on the list is going to be Dimitri Downing, Arizona Meta founder, publisher of Arizona Cannabis News, and a multi-market expert. Hi, Dimitri. Welcome. Ryan Hurley, who's a legal counsel for Copper State Farms, NCIA board member, ADA board, and Prop 205 counsel. Next on the list is Jared Keenan, criminal justice staff attorney for ACLU of Arizona, former public defender, and filed a brief in the Jones case. Welcome, Jared. And next but not least is Sonia Martinez, VP of Arizona Cannabis Bar Association, specializing in cannabis and family law as well as tribal law. And I'd like to toss it on back over to Mike here for getting us started.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I appreciate it. Panelists, I assume you're ready. That wasn't very enthusiastic. Let's try. I won't try it again. I won't do that teacher technique. Let's try it again. Panelists, are you excited? That's better. There's some smiles. I'll take that. Well, good evening, everyone. We're actually going to start our forum now, our legalization panel. And we're going to start by giving each of our panelists a chance to introduce themselves, kind of share their background and their areas of expertise relative to Arizona cannabis law, and also kind of state their overall impression of legalization in Arizona and the Smart and Safe Arizona initiative. Each panelist will have 3 minutes for their introduction, and Todd will, of course, alert you privately when you're coming up on 30 seconds left. So we're going to start in alphabetical order. And with that, we'd like to offer Moe, you the opportunity to talk about yourself and give us your background for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Moe Asnani. I've been in the marijuana industry now for 7 years since it's really opened up here. And we got involved, in 2012, well before any of the dispensaries had to open, and then opened up downtown here in Tucson in August of 2013. And then also got D2, our second location, going in August of 2017. I think my interest in cannabis has always been tied to compliance as well as the overall effects of RSO cannabis oil on, medical patients suffering from intensive diseases like cancer and what have you. My mother was a patient, who suffered from cancer and passed away in 2016. So I think for me, looking at cannabis, it's not just anything that's a business, but it's also beyond that. It's an alternative health solution that probably competes with big pharma in a way that that we're seeing. That's why I always like to think of the current stage we are at with federal legalization as being in the vegetative state, and we're not in flowering yet. So that's kind of where we are. And I think we've been along. I've known Ryan, Dimitri, a lot of these guys for a long time. And it's definitely been one of those journeys where we keep evolving as an industry. And I look forward to what else we do here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mo. We appreciate that. Next is Dimitri Downing. You have 3 minutes to, of course, introduce yourself. Oh.
Unmute, Dimitri, unmute.
Yes. There we go. Dimitri, we'll start you over with a reset. You now have 3 minutes.
I can't believe I made that mistake. I've done a lot of these. So my name is Dimitri Downing. I'm an Arizonan, a graduate of the Just Say No, Devil's Weed, 1980s Reagan policy on marijuana. Went to U of A Law School, prosecuted for the better part of 10 years, 2000, 2010. Economic development after that, the city of Tucson. Got to partake in writing our ordinance for the city of Tucson, which taught me a lot about how government works, but I didn't realize that until afterwards. Talking about that later. 2012, I entered the industry. My family got one of the first licenses with some preconceived notions about what marijuana was, what the marijuana community was, what the marijuana legalization movement was, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, spent 3 years, 2012, 2015, working on understanding the cannabis as a science, cannabis as a medicine, the cannabis community, the cannabis culture, the cannabis plant, legalization movement, to really studied it and got in depth, started interacting in a deep way with Michael Weiser and a bunch of other people. And Ryan, of course, was there, and Mo, so everybody's there, of course. Spent 3 years working in the cannabis industry, getting to understand cannabis policy in a really in-depth way. Started META in 2016, worked on a number of other projects, served on a number of boards of a number of not-for-profit dispensaries, which we all know are really not-for-profit. But we can talk about that later if you guys want to. Yeah, I've been just doing all kinds of things in the cannabis industry for the last 8 years, and it's been a wonderful ride, and NORML has been a wonderful companion.
Thank you, Dimitri. Next is Ryan Hurley. You have 3 minutes to introduce yourself.
All right, thanks, Mike. Thank you, AZ NORML, for having me, inviting me here tonight. I just want to take a second to thank Michael Weiser for all the work that he's done, and I certainly wouldn't be here without him, and I think a lot of us, that applies to a lot of us. I've been around the Arizona legal cannabis cannabis community since 2010 when the law passed. I actually was fortunate enough to be able to work on the Medical Marijuana Act slightly before it was passed, and it was something that I believed in back then, and obviously still do. And through a combination of some strange circumstances, timing, and professional needs, I was able to get out in front and start advocating for the implementation of the Medical Marijuana Act after it was passed, advocating for functional rules at the Department of Health Services, representing folks that wanted to be licensees in the original application, and doing a lot of zoning cases along the way as well. From there, I started the firm's, my old law firm, Rose Law Group's cannabis practice group. I think it was certainly the first cannabis practice group in the state, one of the few first in the country. And we were fortunate enough that not a whole lot of other attorneys in town on the business side were willing to tackle it. So we just kind of got out in front and ran with it. And I built that practice group up and represented clients in all aspects of the Medical Marijuana Act here in Arizona, and some folks in other states as well. Coming up on 3 years ago now, I made the jump, went in-house counsel with Copper State Farms. And so I'm general counsel there now. And, anything that has anything to do with legal aspects comes across my desk. And I'm real excited to be part of a great Arizona company that employs a lot of people in rural Arizona that really needed jobs, and excited about the products and the flower we're putting out now, and really, really excited about legalization, which I think a lot of you know that I've been working on personally since Prop 205, and was awfully devastated when that didn't pass. So I'm looking for a do-over here again in November, on a lot of different fronts, but that one in particular. So thanks for having me, and I hope I can answer some questions and enlighten some folks tonight about the initiative.
Thanks so much, Ryan. We appreciate that. Next, Jared, you're up for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Jared Keenan. I am the criminal justice staff attorney with the ACLU of Arizona. Prior to working with the ACLU, I was a public defender in Yavapai County. So I had a lot of chances and opportunities to, fight for medical marijuana patients up there in Yavapai County in Prescott. The ACLU of Arizona has formally endorsed this initiative and is very supportive of its passing. We think that, the ACLU generally supports their decriminalization efforts, not just related to drugs, but to sort of lowering the criminalization in the state generally. And we support the legalization of marijuana as a very first and necessary step in that direction. We are particularly excited about the aspect that allows for criminal convictions to be expunged. There is, just to give you a highlight of some of the things I might talk about later, we do have some concerns that although this is a obvious step, a necessary step, a no-brainer, in fact, it will not address racial disparities in arrest rates. We have some data on that I'll get into a bit later. So anyway, thank you, and glad to be here.
Thanks so much, Jared. We appreciate that. And lastly, Sonia.
Hey there. Thanks for having me. My name is Sonia Martinez. I've owned my own law practice in Mesa, Arizona for going on 13 years now. I am licensed in a host of tribal courts. So one of the things that I do, other than working with family law litigants and criminal law litigants with respect to their cases and helping them with their cases in terms of cannabis issues, I also assist tribes. I have been assisting tribes in the state of Arizona create and develop their own tribal resolutions and help them figure out what sort of plans they could put together with respect to either medical marijuana, adult use marijuana, or some of the hemp programs. I am also the current vice president of the Arizona Cannabis Bar Association, was the lead attorney in 2018 for Arizona Mamas as they try to get the autism as a qualifying condition. And I am currently, so watch out for this, I'm currently working on an appeal to the Superior Court The appeal comes from the Arizona, from the agency hearings, if you will, on the pregnancy warning, pregnancy and medical marijuana. So we should be getting a decision out of Superior Court, at least, with respect to the medical marijuana and pregnancy, and whether pregnant women who are patients could continue to consume without the risk of their children being taken away. So that's coming up next in the next couple of months. So watch out for that. And thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sonia. And we're going to go over to Ryan, who's going to explain the next step of the panel, and then we're going to start our questioning.
Thanks, Mike. So we will now focus on a series of questions that will examine various topics related to legalization. We will ask 6 questions. Each panelist will be able to field one of the 6 questions to lead the discussion. That response to a panelist will be afforded the opportunity to respond with their own perspective on the question. Each follow-up will be given 2 minutes. And with that, pass it back over to.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Ryan. Ryan did freeze a couple of times, so I just want to make sure we're all good with each person will get an initial question, and I'll say who that will be. That person will have 3 minutes, and then after that, there'll be 2 follow-ups, and they'll have 2 minutes each. And we're going to get started with question 1. I'll do the first 3 questions, then we'll switch, and Ryan will do the last 3. And question number 1 is for Dimitri Downing. And Dimitri, the question is, or the statement that you'll respond to is, please discuss legalization with respect to its place in the history of Arizona cannabis reform.
That's a pretty big topic, but yeah, and I'm also a little confused about the 1, 2, 3 minute thing. It sounded like a CNN presidential debate there. I was like trying to figure that out, but yeah, I mean, this is a momentous year. This is the year that Arizona will pass legalization. And, you know, the best way for me to talk about it is from a personal perspective. You know, when I was growing up in the 90s, Boston University, UA Law School, you know, I was the pretty conservative guy, you know, running around saying, you know, hippie, go home. The marijuana issue is settled. Nancy Reagan and taught us it was going to fry our brain. I tried it a couple times and it did mess up my brain. It didn't fry it, but it just wasn't for me. And, you know, so Arizona has lived under these laws, these draconian laws that aren't consistent with the science of the plant and the right of individuals to have the plant accessible as a choice for therapeutic personal medicine or holistic healing or whatever they want. And so, you know, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, but the specific 2010, this happened, 2015, this happened, 2020, this is going to happen. But you know, the shift in the policy of Arizona cannabis is incredible. And I just saw a poll taken by High Ground today that 65% now supports legalization in some manner. So, you know, I think it's good in general, and I think, you know, policy change of these giant paradigm shift like legalizing cannabis contributes to paradigm shifts in other aspects as well. In my personal life, it contributed to a paradigm shift, understanding substance abuse and alcohol for my own personal use, which was good. And I think that society will benefit from it beyond cannabis. We'll start reflecting more about individual rights and freedoms and choices and the lack of government intervention and involvement in our personal decisions, which I think is going to be a really big side benefit. But yeah, it's exciting times.
Thank you, Dimitri. We appreciate it. We're going to offer in this order, Ryan first and then Sonia, a 2-minute response. So we'll start with Ryan, 2 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, it's as Dimitri said, it is a big question. And I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that this movement in Arizona goes back decades, long before I was involved, long before any of us were involved, before I was a baby. And we stand on the shoulders of giants that got us here and that labored in times that were not nearly as accepting or as open-minded as the ones we live in today. And you know, my freedom was never really at risk for representing folks. There were a couple of times where I had some questions about my law license, but the people that came before us, their freedom was absolutely at risk for the work that they did. So we all owe them a huge debt of gratitude, and we would not have gotten this far without them. You know, this year feels like a culmination in some ways of that movement. It is not the end. We do have more work to go, and I think Jared alluded to that. But it is a huge step, and I think we're going to get it this time. I think the community is more unified than we ever have been, and I hope we can continue that unification and right on into November. So I think this is a historic high watermark for us here in Arizona, but there is work to still be done after this.
Thank you, Jared. I mean, Ryan, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ryan. Sonia, you're next for 2 minutes.
Hey, thanks. Well, first, I echo the sentiments of the previous speakers. I definitely think that those are all things that we should consider. I also think that we need to consider this. You know, Arizona, the Medical Marijuana Act has only been around, you know, just a little bit. You know, we're kind of at the 10-year mark, the 9-10-year mark, if you will. So it's pretty new. So, for example, one of the things I'm going to be speaking on later is family law issues. And I'm going to tell you right now, we still have very little, almost no real law with respect to the discrimination provision for parents in family and dependency courts. We have almost nothing still 10 years later. So while I appreciate the movement and we are moving forward, we still definitely, as Ryan and Dimitri said, we still have a lot of work to do. It takes any state a solid 20, 25 years to actually take these laws and figure out what they really mean. I mean, we saw that with the Jones concentrate extract issue. It took 7-8 years before it finally became law, if you will. So we're plugging along, but definitely have a lot more to do legally for sure.
Thank you, Sonia. We appreciate that. We're going to move on to question 2, and that question is for Ryan Hurley. And Ryan, well, we say they're questions, but the statement that you get to respond to, I suppose, would be more accurate. Please discuss the potential social impact with respect to legalization. And we'll follow up with Dimitri and Moe.
Yeah, another really broad encompassing statement, but the one I like to focus on is sort of the same mantra that I've been repeating with regard to legalization since you know, I started working on it several years ago. And that's the biggest effect that this will have is that overnight, tens of thousands of Arizonans will no longer be subject to a felony for something that they do either occasionally or regularly or even once. That in and of itself is an enormous change, and as Dimitri said, we'll have a lot of downstream changes as well. You know, I don't think I have to tell anybody on this that's watching this what the effects of having a felony on their record are, but they are you know, wide-reaching and affect all aspects of your life. And you know, one thing that always just infuriates me is I see these studies that come up that say, oh, you know, people that use marijuana will end up not making as much money, will end up at a worse station in life later on. And, you know, that's an effect, not a cause, right? I mean, that's a symptom of prohibition. And the fact that people can't understand that, well, they're about to see that because legalization will have a big effect on that. So tens of thousands of Arizonans without felonies every single year. That's the biggest social impact that this will have.
Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate that. Dimitri, you have 2 minutes to respond.
I'll give my rebuttal, Ryan. I can't rebut anything you said. So, but I'll tell you, I've had an interesting journey with the social equity component because in 2012, I came into this industry from the prosecutor economic perspective, understanding that there was money to be made because AZ Post was going to lay off DA card holders and anyone else who had a marijuana card. So I looked at this originally from a financial perspective. Then I met Michael Weiser. In 2013, I met Michael Weiser. And I started this journey of learning, educating, teaching, sharing knowledge with Michael and with NORML at that point. And what I found was the social justice component to the cannabis community and the cannabis industry, which there should be, and hopefully the cannabis industry will remember that as time goes on, But what I saw as a financial opportunity, I came to learn and understand, because I was basically in cannabis university, as the social justice components that exist in themes in numerous capacities and in numerous ways, and different cultures and different ethnicities and different urban, rural areas. The cannabis community has suffered greatly in different capacities. And what that social justice means, whether it's racial or economic or geographically based, is all quite complicated and nuanced, which is something we can get into later, because it's very important for the social equity component of the licenses that are going to be issued, that this is discussed thoroughly and that's get done right by the state of Arizona. But so I learned about the social equity component in the state of Arizona, in the cannabis culture, in the cannabis community with Michael. And what I found is, as my brother and my dad were kind of focused on making the money and putting together an organization, I had the good fortune of being paid as much as I was getting paid as a prosecutor, economic development specialist, just to learn about the cannabis community, the cannabis culture, the cannabis components in regards to social equity, et cetera. And I found that NORML and the industry could have a unique partnership in sharing information with each other. And that's kind of where META came from. You know, Michael Weiser was one of the inspirations behind META, because I was trying to incorporate, you know, some of that social justice component with the message of META, which was the message of the industry, but it's a balancing act, and the two need to work together. So hopefully, you know, we can fight for and improve some of those social equity components. But certainly, as Ryan said, the biggest change is, you know, people are the concept of people being arrested and imprisoned and burdened for the rest of their life is thrown right out the window. And that's going to be impacting hundreds of thousands of individuals, if not millions, over decades, that won't have to suffer that particular injustice. But the social equity component is broad and complicated, and anybody who wants to can come to a META meeting and share it with people, and self-promotion.
Thank you, Dimitri. We appreciate that.
Thanks,
and Mo, you have 2 minutes to rebut Dimitri and Ryan, or contribute or add to what they had to say.
I don't think I have anything to rebut that these people said. I think it's very much aligned, you know, with the realities of where we are today. In terms of the social component of it, right? There's a social equity part, and then there's also normalization. So, and I understand that's the name of your organization, but it's really the main thing here, right? Today in Arizona, 236,000 patients, basically a $300 fee unless you're low income to even have a card, which is now good for 2 years. That is not the case in adult use. In adult use, any adult who's 21 or over can go into a store and access it. And the number of people I still meet today, you know, who not in our circles, but like, what, medical marijuana is legal in Arizona? I still hear that. And that's what's mind blowing to me, is that we are kind of this community of a few 100,000 people that's just kind of tucked away in Arizona. And I think what adult use will do is bring that to the forefront and say, you know what, it's available to you. You can use that as an option. I think opioid use will go down even more than it already has. There's studies that show opioid mortality went down close to 35% in states that had legalized for adult use, simply because of the access component and not having, you know, to get a card first or be on a special list. I think when you look at that, along with the fact that, you know, a lot of people don't want to be on a list, and there's a Second Amendment component where they don't want to give up their gun rights because they got a medical marijuana card, whereas in an adult use program, there's not really any documentation of the fact that you may use marijuana. So I think there's multiple facets to it, and that's why it'll be a great thing.
Thank you, Mo. We appreciate it. Ryan.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, not only will it no longer be a felony, but the expungement part that we all worked very hard to put into the initiative means that people that already are strapped with conviction have the opportunity to go back and clear that off. That's not unique to Arizona's law, but it's one of a few that were written into the initiative from the get-go, and we all worked very hard to make sure that happened. So that's another huge aspect of this law.
Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate that. And we're going to move on to my last question for the panelists, which is question number 3, and that is for Jared Keenan. And Jared, you have 3 minutes to, and I think this is right in your wheelhouse, please discuss the impact that legalization will have on criminal justice.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, much of what was already said is going to, it addresses how this will impact criminal justice. Arizona is the only state that criminalizes at the felony level first-time possession of any amount of marijuana, and that is outrageous. We send people to prison for possessing marijuana. That is also outrageous, and so overall, this is a like I said earlier, a no-brainer and something that definitely should happen. However, there is some, I guess, caution that we should, or I guess some things we should consider, especially if we're interested in racial equity as this process of legalization moves forward. So, around the country, states have begun to legalize marijuana, and the good news is that since 2010, there's been an 18% decrease in marijuana arrests around the nation. However, in 2018, there were more arrests for marijuana than in 2015. So there has been a slight uptick recently. That's mainly due to increases in arrest in states like Arizona, where marijuana is still illegal. And almost 90% of those marijuana arrests are still for possession, right? So there's a lot of work that needs to get done. When it comes to racial equity, as I mentioned, even in states that have legalized marijuana, there are still racial disparities related to who gets arrested for marijuana possession. And so marijuana marijuana possession arrests in states that have legalized marijuana are 8 times higher for Black folks than they are for white folks, even though most studies show that use is about the same. Now, the good news is that rate is lower for states that have legalized, and that disparities in arrest rates are higher in states that haven't legalized. So there is some good news for just off the bat when states legalize, but I think that legalization alone isn't going to solve these sort of racial disparity issues. There are policing practices that need to be addressed to sort of really solve that issue, but it is something that I think advocates should keep in mind when discussing legalization and how to move a legalization program forward. They should be trying to eliminate those racial disparities as much as they possibly can.
Thank you, Jared. Sonia, we're going to go to you next, and then I will ask all the panelists if someone else would want to go after Sonia to fill in. That would be great. We could take another person to fill in for Tom. So Sonia, we'll give you 2 minutes, and then we'll see if anybody else has something to add.
All right, a couple of thoughts. First, we're still going to have to be safe and responsible with respect to our use of cannabis. I cannot tell you the number of medical marijuana patients, valid card-holding patients that I've represented in criminal court because they were charged with felony possession of marijuana because they did not comply with Arizona's Medical Marijuana Act. The typical person that gets charged is somebody that consumes in public. So consuming at a ballpark, in a parking lot, etc. So even if and when we pass adult use, we're still gonna have to be safe and responsible, because if we're not, we're still gonna be arrested, cited, stopped by the police, talked to. Okay, we're not gonna get felonies. And this initiative has some juice to it, but to be clear, we still have to be safe and responsible. Secondly, just a little bit about the expungement issue. In my opinion, doing criminal defense, the expungement issue is a little bit weak. And when I say it's a little bit weak, because the law would expunge only very specific crimes, very few crimes. I think it's expungement if you were convicted of having less than an ounce or less than 6 plants. The reality is, however, we have a task diversion program. So while, yes, there are people with actual felony convictions for possession, typically most of those people have their charges diverted and then taken down to a misdemeanor paraphernalia. So the expungement provision in this act does not expunge much. Just saying.
Thank you, Sonia. Would someone else like to add on to that? We'll give you 2 minutes. Don't be shy.
Jared.
Yeah, I'll respond to my own question.
I guess that's allowed.
Sonia made me think of something. Another challenge that's definitely going to come up after legalization is, there are entrenched powers that will try to undermine the legalization effort even after it happens, right? We have seen this particularly by elected county attorneys in Maricopa County and Yavapai County, just to name a couple examples, right? Who have done everything in their power to undermine the protections of the Medical Marijuana Act, and there's no reason to think that they're not going to try to do everything they can to undermine legalization in Arizona once it passes. So I think that lawyers and others that are want to protect what would be a new right for adult use should be ready to fight these fights in court, and just be prepared for that, unless the voters not only vote in medical marijuana but vote out dinosaur prosecutors that aren't ready to change with the times.
And how do you think how likely do you think that is to happen?
There's
right?
an exciting county attorney race in Maricopa, so we'll see.
That's very true. In fact, one of the other things that I saw out there was that there's a high cost associated with expungement in the states that have passed that. Is that something that you guys expect to see transferred over to Arizona as well when it comes down to it?
I don't think so. I mean, even for setting aside convictions, it costs basically nothing. So I don't anticipate there's going to be a large cost unless the person feels as though they need an attorney to do the paperwork. This definitely appears to be like one of those legal issues that probably most people could do, on their own, especially with just a little bit of guidance. But there'll be people probably still paying an attorney to do it. I think the filing costs are going to be minimal. I anticipate they'd be minimal.
Yeah, and I'm not a criminal attorney, but my understanding is that Arizona didn't really have an expungement process to begin with, and so we kind of had to create one whole cloth in the initiative, and that is something that really nobody else around the country has done. There also, I believe there's some funding in there to make sure that communities that have been affected by the drug war have access and knowledge of this expungement process. And so there's some funds dedicated to making sure that people are aware that this exists and that they can take advantage of it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And that will end my part of the questioning. We're 3 questions in with 3 more to go. And I'm going to let Ryan then do the duties from now on. Ryan, feel free to continue, unless we all need a break, but I think we're good. I'll make that as an executive decision I'll make for us. And Ryan, go ahead and go with question number 4.
Thanks, Mike. Much appreciated. So for Sonia, if you could, please discuss the impact of legalization on families and parental rights. You have 3 minutes.
Thanks. So let me just say that this particular initiative does not speak to any parental rights in family or dependency courts. There is no provision in it that amends Title 25 or amends Title 8, the ARS codes that deal with families and dependency courts. And again, there's no provision that is like the Medical Marijuana Act, where there actually is a discrimination provision that supports parents as long as parents are, again, being safe and responsible. As a matter of fact, in the Medical Marijuana Act, not in the Adult Use Initiative, but in the Medical Marijuana Act, the discrimination provision basically protects a parent's custodial and visitation rights as long as their behavior is not creating an unreasonable risk of harm or danger to the children. As I mentioned just a bit ago, that particular provision has not really been litigated. I've had a couple clients that I say, hey, come on, let's appeal this. And they don't want to. There have been, I think, 2 decisions in the Court of Appeals. Those decisions aren't even citable. So because we don't have any real basis in terms of parental rights as respects the adult use that we're trying to pass, I'm thinking we may try to look at it probably the way we look at alcohol under the law. For those of you who are not aware, just briefly, The family law, ARS code, actually prohibits a parent that has a DUI conviction or any drug conviction in the prior 12 months from having custody, from having legal custody, unless they are able to rebut the presumption. And so to be clear, even alcohol in family law context is not a good thing if one party is able to show that there's an abuse issue, not a use issue, an abuse issue. So I'm thinking that the adult use marijuana is probably going to be treated by the courts somewhat like alcohol, but chemistry wise not. So people are not going to be going to task to get tested because marijuana is different from alcohol chemistry wise. But I think the courts are going to probably take the same sort of approach, same sort of view. I don't think the courts are going to piggyback on the medical marijuana protection provision. I think they're going to, because I'll be quite frank, even judges in Superior Court nowadays still don't necessarily support that provision, and that's for medical patients. So I don't think Superior Court judges are going to be quick to want to protect recreational parental rights, if you will, because they're not very quick to protect the medical marijuana patient parental rights. So I think it goes back to being safe and responsible, and hopefully not having a vindictive ex or a vindictive state workers that want to mess with your parental rights.
Right. So how do they determine that threshold, right, between abuse and use? I mean, how is that determined? I mean, we all know the issues that are happening right now on the DUI front, right? So I could only imagine what a mess that's going to be once it comes down to dealing with kids and families as well.
Absolutely. And how to measure the threshold is exactly like what you said with the DUI. It's a totality of the circumstances. It is what the judges think. And by the way, if you don't know, that most Superior Court judges come from the county attorney's office. There are a lot that are not previous county attorneys, but I say a substantial number of Superior Court judges are past prior county attorneys.
So it's going to be interesting. And like was mentioned earlier, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we're definitely making progress, right? So Jared, if you'd like to step in and follow up on that.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with Sonia. I think that unfortunately many judges have very antiquated views of marijuana use, and but the good news is the public in my lifetime had very antiquated views about marijuana, and they have relatively quickly changed. And I think that judges are going to be slower to change than the average Arizonan, but I think that once they see that this can be done safely, legally, and without much problem, they'll start coming around. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a problem in the legal system for some time, just because judges have a lot of discretion to make decisions in family law and other areas based on whatever they sort of perceive as a problem, including alcohol use or marijuana use.
Right.
So yeah, I do think that's a big issue.
So do you see any other potential challenges as we start navigating this landscape? Jared, if you don't mind, just a little follow-up question for you there.
Yeah, sure. Additional, no, I mean, I think that this initiative does do a relatively decent job of setting aside money for communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, as I believe Ryan mentioned. And so, I think that's better than some other initiatives. But I think we can't lose sight of the fact that the war on drugs has been like an overwhelming failure and devastating in certain communities over others. And as much as this initiative can work to remedy some of those issues, I think that's something that is exciting.
Ryan, I just tacked something on there. The specific protections in the Medical Marijuana Act, they're written there, but we all see, as Sonia mentioned, that the frequently have to be litigated, right? People always used to ask me, well, why my employer can't fire me for being a card holder? Say, well, the law says they can't, but that doesn't mean they're not going to, right? and just because the law says something, enforcing that is a whole other story. So there will be cases that come out of this inevitably, and we will see. I think take some things take some time to work their way through, particularly decisions from old cold drug war prohibitionist judges. Thankfully, the Arizona Supreme Court to date has largely made just about every decision correct under the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act, and so I think we have a pretty good backstop there. And I do want to add, in the initiative language, there is a catch-all provision that says that for the things that are authorized under the act, that the state or any of its subdivisions can't punish you or take away any right or privilege that you would otherwise have. So it's sort of a broad catch-all provision rather than doing specific line-by-line issues.
One other issue on that, if I may, real quick, it dawned on me. I think it's important for medical marijuana patients to keep their card even after legalization, because as several people have mentioned, right, the Medical Marijuana Act does provide explicit protections that adult recreational use won't. And so, people who do qualify for a card should keep up on having that card valid.
So what's the difference between what that's going to look like between having your card and just being anyone here, any normal Arizona citizen that decides that they want to go in and make a purchase? What's the difference in protection there? What's that look like? Jared or Ryan, if either of you guys would like to jump in, or anyone else for that matter.
I don't know about protection. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I think the main thing is that there's going to be, limits on what you can buy if you're not a card holder that are significantly more restrictive than if you're a card holder. 2.5 ounces is the medical limit. I believe it's an ounce in adult use. And then also the milligrams, per unit. A national standard that's slowly emerging is 10 milligrams per unit, 100 milligrams per package. And I think that that'll apply for adult use, and then medical will still have the same benefits they do today. So that's my breadth of knowledge there.
Thanks, Mo. Sonia, did you have something that you'd like to add? Or I thought I saw your hand go up there for a second. Oh, you're just scratching. Okay.
No, just stretching. But I agree that there are definitely different provisions, including the edible cap for the recreational or for the adult use. And those things are put in place for a reason. I know that a lot of people mention, especially medical patients, mention, 10 milligrams. Oh, that's ridiculous. I could take 1,000. But, I also know patients who say that they freak out off of 10 milligrams. So I understand and appreciate the 10 milligram cap in a general sense, for the specific. Not many people appreciate it or like it, but I understand why it's in our initiative for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. I'd like to move on to the next question, or here, next topic. I'd like to pass this on over to Ryan. And the topic is, please discuss what impact legalization will have on current medical marijuana patients and how it might affect the medical marijuana community.
Yeah, so we started to allude on some of the differences there. I do agree with Jared, particularly if you might have occasion to ever carry more than an ounce on you for any reason whatsoever. Make sure to keep your card, even though between an ounce and 2.5 ounces under the initiative is a civil violation and not a felony by any means. It's still a good idea to keep that card. The other reason, you will not be subject to the additional 16% tax. So it might, depending on how it might be beneficial for you to keep your card.
I think we're losing you there a little bit, Ryan.
The additional tax versus the cost of getting the card for. Okay.
There we go.
Yep.
Are you back here
now?
Yes. Yeah.
Hold on. I can get my son to stop playing Fortnite. 1 minute.
I could sing a song while he's gone.
Well, if you've got anything to add for a minute while Ryan's on mute, we'd love to hear from you, Dimitri.
I don't know. I don't imagine I do most of what I said has won't help, and it was spoken about yesterday anyways. So I'm just focused on it's coming together. That's it.
Well, that's what it's all about right now, right? So this is where we're at, and we're moving forward. So Ryan, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, so the biggest difference is obviously be the difference in the ability to possess up to 2.5, possess and purchase up to 2.5 ounces, and then the edible cap. Yeah, we made a lot of strides to make sure there's a specific provision in the initiative that says this initiative does not affect the medical marijuana initiative. So, patients and cardholders should see less of an interruption in service than they would see in any other state. So I think we tried really hard to make sure that the program would be, there would be a lot of continuity for patients. The one thing that I could see potentially being problematic is these high dose edibles that some medical patients really rely on and like. From a business perspective, it might be harder for a business to justify making a 1,000 milligram edible for a smaller population, whereas they're going to retool everything else for a 10 milligram, 100 milligram cap edible. So if you're a patient and there's a high dose edible that you are really need, I would make sure you tell your dispensary, tell that manufacturer that, and make sure that they understand that you need it so that they continue to make it. That would be the one thing that I could see maybe slightly changing going forward.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Much appreciated. I'd like to open it up for responses. Mo, like to toss it on over to you.
Yeah, I think that the excise tax is definitely something that is directed not towards patients by any means, but remember, there's 44 million visitors to Arizona every year who are not able to purchase marijuana. There's card holders from other states who come here. We have no reciprocity, obviously. So that's really to cater more to them, and at the same time, now to feed the much depleted general fund while doing it. But I think that, the majority of patients who do have their cards today, I don't think it makes sense to give up your card, especially now that's good for 2 years, and it offers you so many more protections legally, as well as the ability to buy products that adult users wouldn't be able to. So that combination, I think, will really drive an increase in demand. But tourism is something, I don't know, it will probably come back by 2021. Right now, not so much, but yeah, we shall see.
Thanks, Mo. Sonia or Jared or Dimitri, would you guys like to jump in for the second response on this?
I'd like to be known as the walrus for the rest of the seminar.
I think we will try, but barring that, welcome back. I saw you dropped off for a second. Sonia or Jared, would you like to jump in on the second half here? Second response to the medical marijuana patients and how it might affect medical marijuana community.
Yeah, I mean, related to patients, one group of patients that are not going to be affected at all by the legal adult use legalization are children who rely on medical cannabis to alleviate their ailments, particularly seizure related ailments. With the ACLU, I worked on a brief in that Jones case that I think you mentioned, or Mike mentioned, which had to do with the use of extracted marijuana and whether patients were allowed to use it under the Medical Marijuana Act. And in that brief, we represented a number of parents whose children relied on medical marijuana extracts to alleviate their pain and suffering. And so, it's great that this act explicitly says it does not affect the Medical Marijuana Act, because patients like those children obviously need the benefits of AMA to continue getting their medicine.
Great, thanks, Jared. And in fact, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I just want to add that finally medical marijuana patients after November will be able to grow their own marijuana. That is not something you can do under the medical marijuana program for the most part, unless you happen to live more than 25 miles away from a dispensary. So that's another big benefit and reason for patients to support this so that they can bring the cost of their medicine down by growing their own.
Awesome, thank you. Now, actually, I see a question that just kind of popped up over here, and I'd like to kind of bring it up right now while we're on the topic. But do we know what the expected sales tax percentage for recreational purchases is looking like once we legalize for adult use?
Yes, so it's 16% on top of ordinary sales tax. So it's a 16% more than you'd be paying now for medical.
Great, thank you. So my understanding,
that's the lowest tax rate of any initiative or any law in the country so far.
I was going to say that's really reasonable compared to when you look at some of the other states out west, northwest, right? What's some of the worst that you've seen out there? Just as an example.
I mean, I think Washington rolled out total tax for up near 50%.
And in California, the multiple layered taxation is also a problem. There's a cap on the high, right, Ryan?
What's that, Dimitri?
There's a cap on how high it can get, no matter what. Even if the federal government comes in and decides to do a tax.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so that's something that's important about Smart and Safe, which actually a lot of other initiatives don't have to, is that if there is any kind of federal tax instituted, it would actually slide down for the state side of it, so it doesn't go over a certain amount. I believe it's 30%, Ryan. Maybe you remember it better than I do, but yeah.
I don't remember the exact number, but it is intended to make sure that if the feds ever come in with a tax, that it isn't cumulative.
That and to answer your question, California, again, some counties are going as high as 45%. Washington averages about 36. So yeah.
So the 16% that we're looking at here for Arizona is in fact more than reasonable then compared to where everyone else is kind of looking. Awesome. Well, thanks guys, much appreciated on that. I'd like to move on to the next topic, which is going to be for Moe. And Moe, if you could, please discuss the political and economic impact related to legalization.
So I think we've always looked at marijuana in terms of kind of being in a bucket with a lot of other issues, right? And here's going to be an interesting thing is if we legalize and we have adult use here, you really are going to have a big economic generator, which given the pandemic and then everything that's happening now, the state needs us more than ever. And I think this is where we have to tune our messaging in a way to where even though the people we may not agree with on everything hear it and they care about the numbers, they care about the non-emotional aspects, they care about only the things that are going to be quantifiable. And in some ways, I don't know if all those hearts and minds are going to change, but that's the state we're in. This is still Arizona. And I think we kind of have to take that issue, isolate it, and then also say, look, economically here, I think the initial estimate is $300 million in tax revenue. That's going to be needed now. Before it was like a luxury to have. Today, after the budget's looking at a $1.1 billion deficit here, I think this is where we really get to the level of where we can compete with big pharma, compete with alcohol, compete with everybody else and say, look, we're as important as they are. Pay attention to us. And I think taking everything else out, yes, criminal justice is important. Everything we're talking about here is important, especially racial disparity today. But with the people we're dealing with, that doesn't always, and I know that's not the most popular thing, but that doesn't always resonate with them. And I think that's kind of where we say, just look at the numbers. We're doing this for our state. Treat us as equals. Stop treating us as less thans. And I think that's going to be the core political and economic argument.
Great response there. I'd like to turn it over to Dimitri for response to Moe there.
Yeah, I was just busy contemplating what life would have been like if I was Paul.
So very important topics then, right?
Yeah, sorry about that. No, Mo covered it pretty well. It just, I can't really enhance that. Get some of the people's questions, so we can answer some questions.
Brian, I'll just add that to follow on to what Mo was saying, the initiative doles out the tax money to a much broader and more diverse base of interest than it had previously. And so we're going to be creating all sorts of new alliances and new relationships as we go forward between the industry, between our consumers and our patients, and other aspects of Arizona society. One example is the highway fund. Right now, after November, after we start generating tax fund, every highway that you drive in this state is going to have marijuana dollars on it. So we need to remind people of that as we go forward. We need to continue to build these coalitions, and we need to not stop at marijuana. We need to use our power and our newfound clout to continue to improve things in the state.
Absolutely, 100%. Such a large impact all the way around. Jared, love to hear from you.
Yeah, I think some other political impacts that are beneficial are, so far it seems that the studies seem to indicate that that legalization reduces the amount of illicit cultivation of marijuana, right? So it's taking power away from, those that are currently supplying marijuana in the black market. Not entirely, because there's obviously places where there still needs to be a black market, places where marijuana is not legal, but that is a good side benefit. The other piece that I was thinking of is there's recent studies now that suggest that with the diversion of resources away from arresting folks for possessing and using marijuana, clearance rates for other crimes, meaning the rate at which the police solve other crimes, much more serious crimes usually, right, goes up. And so that the public safety benefits because we're not wasting time and resources going after marijuana users. So
nonviolent kind of activities that really people shouldn't be locked up for anyway, right? Exactly. So let's put those dollars to use and get the real damaging aspects of what people do off the streets and make it better for everyone, right? Exactly. All right. Well, thank you guys. Much appreciated there. With that, I'd like to well, actually, I think we've got a few minutes. Mike, do you think we've got a few minutes here to talk about this question that just popped up, or?
Muting. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. Did you? Michael? What was that, Dimitri?
Have we talked about Michael? Has I mean, it's all right. I just thought give Michael a couple minutes. It's okay though. It's on point.
Well, I think it's extremely important that what we're doing is in line with what Michael Weiser had started. I think that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah. No. I just maybe we could talk a little bit about our memories of Michael. I mean, Michael meant so much to all of us. I know Ryan and Mo and Sonia and Jared were all friends with Michael, Mike, Ryan. All you guys were. A lot of the audience members, everybody out there knows Michael. I just didn't know if NORML has covered that in a topic, but it's okay. I'm just.
It is something that's been brought up several times. I know that the support from the community has been absolutely amazing. So I think us pulling together and uniting, on the same directive that was started by Michael is our way of honoring him, and seeing that over the finish line is really what our goal is. So ultimately, everyone's here because of Michael. And I think that's extremely important to acknowledge, like you said. But we also have to keep moving forward. This is something that is not going to stop just because of what happened, right? So if someone has anything that they would like to say about, Michael, by all means.
Well, I just like to point out that, Michael, he was so committed to the Smart and Safe initiative, and he was really looking forward to the next chapter in his life. As him and I had talked about NORML for many years because he was the executive director, and working with NORML in 2013, 14, 15, 16, we would talk about strategically and the vision as to where NORML would go and how it could become a great consumer advocacy group, so Ralph Nader type thing, a center to focus on consumer advocacy, patient advocacy. And he was really looking forward to working with the industry and in partnership and with guys like Moe and Ryan and Mark Steinmetz. He was really looking forward. The initiative has some compromises, which everyone's fully aware of, and Michael is fully aware of. But was just so committed to this cause. So, I just wanted to recognize him and how important it was, and how happy he was that he could be a bridge and bring people together and bring the consumers and the patients together with the industry and the reported interests, et cetera. So,
Well, absolutely. And frankly, thanks Dimitri for saying that, because, he dedicated, the past several years of his life to patient rights and ensuring that everyone was given the fair opportunity for consumption, if that's what they decided to do. But he focused on that education and information aspect, so people could make their own decisions. And I think that was extremely important too.
Yeah, I'd like to recognize, Sonia, Jared, Moe, Ilava, Copper State. I saw all you guys we helped set up that GoFundMe with NORML the night he passed away, because I was one of the guys that helped fund Michael and his activities prior to him working for Smart and Safe. But you guys all stepped up and donated, and I talked to Beth every day, every other day, and this has really helped her in the transition period. Michael was the breadwinner over there, and he would be so grateful when I saw Mark Steinmetz's name pop up, within an hour, for $500. The respect that people have given him and his wife, and donated every $5, every $10 to the GoFundMe account helps, and it's all going to a very good person, and honoring the memory of him and helping his family. So if anybody wants to contribute to that GoFundMe, Beth is really grateful. I can tell you that.
Yeah, she absolutely is. And frankly, one of the things that has helped with this whole situation that we find ourselves in is the support and the unity, everyone coming together for that same reason. So it's been absolutely amazing. And the GoFundMe page is still up and active, like Dimitri was saying. So if there is anyone out there that would like to contribute in addition to what has already been contributed, it would definitely be appreciated. And it is going straight over to Beth. And
I'd like to announce that I'm the first Mexican beetle.
Well, thank you, everyone. Looks like we're hitting about an hour and 15 minutes. So we've stayed actually pretty close to the time that we had allotted for tonight's panel. So thank you. If there is anyone that would like to bring up anything else, Ryan, love to hear from you.
Yeah, I will just add, sort of to piggyback off Dimitri there. One of the most amazing things to me about Michael and the work that he did was that Michael was most powerful when we were disagreeing. We didn't always disagree about how to get things done. We didn't always agree on legislation, but Michael knew that we agreed about more than we disagreed about, and he knew that we wanted the same thing, and that is to legalize marijuana. So I hope that everybody listening will support the initiative and get it over the finish line so we can have a victory party that Michael would have been proud of.
Thank you, Ryan. I'd also like to add, the last time I got to really talk to Michael at length was on 420. I talked to him briefly about this event, but that was like a 5-minute conversation. But it was kind of fitting that it was on 420 that and he was a guy who brought everybody together when they were really far apart. And that is a skill. I don't know too many people who have it. I don't think I do. I don't think a lot of us do. But many people, looked at Michael and said, he's going to be the glue that brings us together. And he did. And that's why Smart and Safe is here. We're all, we don't have industry and activists here. That's why we're all kind of together, is because of Michael. And I just think it's really important to go through life and not hold grudges too long, or not get too worked up at somebody. You can get worked about something. And I think that's really the most important lesson he taught us.
Yeah, he definitely took any opportunity he could to bring people together instead of having that polarizing conflict remain. So that was, you're absolutely right. It was something that was unique. It's something that wish there was more of out there.
Yes.
Sonia or Jared, if you guys would like to say something.
I just want to say, please go out and vote vote yes on this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia.
I agree. Thank you.
And there you have it, folks. That is the conclusion for the legalization panel hosted by Arizona NORML. And I would like to thank each of our panelists, Moe, Dimitri, absolutely.
The walrus.
What's that?
The walrus.
The walrus. Ryan, thank you very much for your contribution as well. Jared, absolute pleasure. And Sonia, once again, welcome.
Yes, thank you so much to each of you. And we're grateful to have had you, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
And I would also like to thank the production team as well. We've got Jenny Sadler with Plant Powered Remedies that's been helping on the technology front. We also have Todd Gilchrist on the back end here as well. Allison Stein with the Kush Chronicles. And of course, we have Mike Robinette and myself. So we're looking at setting up a town hall coming up towards the later end of the month here, where we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the activities that have been happening, like during our normal meeting time. So look out for the emails. And if you haven't signed up on the website, so you'd be receiving that, I urge you to do it now. And with that, our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, July 7th at 7 p.m. That's Tuesday, July 7th at 7 p.m. I'll be getting that up on the website. So that'll be a great reference for you guys in the future. Thank you all and have a great night. Mike, if you had anything that you would like to add.
No, thank you as well. It's been great working and enjoyed really listening to your guys' perspective. So we are very thankful to have had each of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks all.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Thank you for your input, everybody.